I think it all began with the knowledge that I had from my father, who had served in World War One, and he never let us forget that, that it was an honor to serve for one's country, and he encouraged my older brother and myself when we became of age to consider being in the military, and I think it left a great impression when we felt that we were really following in our father's footsteps at that time. I was 18. The people that I had gone to school with and had grown up with, they were doing the same thing, and you felt that there must be some underlying strong reason that these young people are enlisting and prepared to serve their country. And I think it sort of instilled a sense of duty into a person, that it wasn't for self, it was for country that you were really, really concerned about. Because I think, even at that age, you began to realize that things could happen to your country, and if you lost the freedoms that you had, you would never get them back. Everyone started out in the infantry, unless you had some special training that qualified you to go into another branch of the service, and then you sort of evolved into something else. I started out in the Canadian Infantry Corps, of course, as a basic training. Then I spent some time in the Canadian Service Corps, and then when things began to sort of gel, when the war was sort of closing down, they gave us an opportunity to select another unit. And I don't know why a good number of us chose to go to the Princess Patricias, and it was quite an experience to become part of that particular group of military people. I think it was in 1919 that the young captain was training with part of the group that formed the Regina Hockey Club at that time, and they named the Regina Pats in honor of the Patricia Battalion.
Indian Head had a, in those days it was called the Non-Permanent Active Militia. It had a battery for many, many years. And when it mobilized, it joined with the 60th Battery from Aneroid to become, it was originally the 60th/76 Battery. That's how it was mobilized. And then it was divided later into two separate batteries. When I learned that the battery was being mobilized, I went down in July. I was then a clerk in a bookkeeper at a store. So I went down to see about joining and explained. As a matter of fact, I ended up talking to the battery commander, who was Major Bolter, and he said, well, you could join now. And I said, no, I can't because I have an obligation to tidy up my books for the end of the month. He said, well, you could join and give you leave. And I said, well, I would sooner wait and come back tidy. So I went home, finished up, and come back on the 1st of August to join. I suspect it was the fairgrounds in Indian Head, where we had a camp with tents and kitchens were set up and that sort of thing. So we started our basic training there, and we did have a couple of guns, old 18-pounders, that we started with basic gun drill. But from Indian Head, we went to Camp Petawawa in Ontario, which is now a big permanent camp. And as I remember, the place we lived in wasn't quite finished, in the sense that there were still carpenters around, and as I remember, we went there in November, I think, I'm sure, and the huts weren't particularly good. The heating system, was a heater in the middle of a barrack block along one hut, along one side of an H hut, and but we managed. They set up canteens and kitchens, and there were places where lessons indoors. So it was pretty intensive for that winter. And at that point, we got our first colonel. We were operating then as a 60th Battery, 76th, and then a battery from, well, a Lakehead and Portage la Prairie, which was the 37th Battery. So the 37th, the 60th, and the 76th made up the 17th Field Regiment, and we had an officer come back from England to be our commanding officer. That was Colonel Thackeray, who was a regular soldier and a First War veteran. We went from Petawawa to England. Waterloo West Barracks in Aldershot, England. We were there, I think, November, and I came back late the next May. I had been recommended for a commission, and I guess if the regiment had stayed in Canada longer, I probably would have attended officer training in Canada, but I went to England, and at that time, I understand that General MacNaughton said the Canadian candidates would no longer go to the British officer training school. They would come back to Canada after they were commissioned, do a tour of duty as instructors, and then go back overseas. And I was one of I think my batch, if I can use that term, was the first big one that came back. It was pretty tough, having taken down 3 stripes and a gun and then being chased around by a lance corporal. That's what hurt, but you had to get used to it. I think it was part of the system. The first 2 months were basically infantry training, basic tactics. And then in the final month, if you were going to be a signaller, you went to the signal wing or the artillery wing or infantry or whatever. And then we went to Brandon. And then I went back out there as a teacher for 3 months to the basic school. And it was quite a difference being on the staff and being a cadet. And I refused to tolerate this silly nonsense of being chased around a circle when you forgot something.
February 42 in Calgary, I joined HMCS Tecumseh. I was in high school, 17. I wasn't doing very well. I was a dandy football player, but that was the limits of my skills. I was in the Reserve Army, and I was a signalman, so I knew how to operate Morse code, which was a skill that was needed in the Navy. But I wasn't that enamored with the dust and the dirt of the Army. So I tried the Air Force, and they caught me with my eye. I'm blind in one eye. And so I went to the Navy, and I cheated my way through the medical. I went read the chart this way, and then I read the chart this way, and I got through. And so I was trained in a secret school in Ottawa. Do you know Stevenson, the famous story of about Enigma? Well, we were the frontline troops for that effort. We did the direction finding and so forth for that, and so I was trained in Ottawa for that for, about 2 months. Well, I was assigned to Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, and there was a shore station there, and I went there for another couple of months and then was drafted overseas. Picked up a new ship in England, HMCS Sioux. And we had the 2 ships there, the Algonquin and the Sioux. They were sister ships built side by side. They were fleet-class destroyers. They're lighter than the Tribals and faster.
I joined in the 7th of July, 1940, but I must tell you how we wound up there. We were on a farm then, and a friend of mine lived in town in Gilbert Plains, Manitoba, and we used to meet up, and we were fooling around, standing on our heads beside the sidewalk, and he wore glasses. He took them off and put them down, and I reached out to grab them, and I stepped and broke the glasses. Then, of course, we had a bit of a scramble. I had to pay for them $1.75 to fix that side of the glasses. He said, well, hell with it, why don't we join up? And his uncle was a colonel in Winnipeg, so that's what we did. We went to Winnipeg and joined up then. But I was an old fellow when I joined up at 19. Started out in Winnipeg and then Camp Shallow, Manitoba. And when we was Army Service Corps, but I was attached to a field ambulance. We were stationed, used to have to go to London quite a bit, and we were down in a place called East Grinstead there. And talking about bombing, this evening, and about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, there was a big theater there. You've probably heard about it, getting all blown up. And we spent all that night there rescuing people. There was 360 some people who were all, and it would have got a lot more. But the theater was all blown to bits.
I was born in Henryburg, Saskatchewan, which is about 20 kilometers northeast of Prince Albert. I was raised on the farm, and of course we had to do some fall work, and those days was with horses. And I said to my father, would you be able to buy a tractor this fall? The neighbors have all got tractors. No, as long as we've got hay, we'll always have horses. Well, I said, I'm tired of horses. Would you take me to the bus station, and I'm going to join the Army? And that was August 1944, 4 days before my 18th birthday. They put me into infantry because they were always short of infantrymen. And infantrymen is the ones that are in front line. So it's quite a job. And from there, I think they sent me to Camrose, Alberta for basic training, and that was 2 months. And from there, Curry Barracks, Calgary, and I was another two months there. And from there, back to Dundurn, and worked in administration for quite a while. I injured a foot, and I was not fit to go overseas. So I was detailed to jobs like regimental police or kitchen duty or anywhere I was needed. Once I was fit again, I volunteered for Japan, but we were, I think there was 155 of us on a troop train on the way to Camp Vernon, BC, and we only got as far as Kamloops, BC that night. They stopped the train and informed us the war was over.
I was born and raised in a small town outside of London, Ontario. It's called Belmont. I'm the eldest of 4 children, and war started in 1939, and many teen friends joined, and pretty soon many friends were away on course or overseas, and I felt rather lonely. When I was 18, I decided that I would join the service as well. I had no objections from my parents. My father was thrilled that one of his children was going to join. Many of even my family were already in the Navy, and I thought it was pretty smart. But I also felt lonely in my small town with so many friends gone away that I wanted to be where they were. So I did join the Navy in London, and immediately they gave me a ticket to go on the train to Windsor, Ontario. Well, I had never been on a train alone. I'm just a small town girl, and they gave me a ticket for a meal, and someone would meet me in Windsor at the station. I got off the train and didn't see any sailors or girls in uniform at all. Well, then I really felt more distressed about the situation. I went to the station master and said, "Where is the Navy ship?" And they told me it's 5 blocks down the street. I thought, well, I guess I gotta hoof it. So I did. I checked my baggage there and walked 5 long blocks to HMCS Hunter. Small front on the main street in Windsor, and a sailor was outside, and he took one look at me, and I took a look at him, and he said, "Can I help you?" I said, "I was supposed to be met at the station." "Oh my God," he said, "wait here." So immediately he brought out a female. Well, if you think they weren't apologetic, all over me, as so embarrassed. So they forgot to meet the train. They took me to a house 2 doors down and said, "You will stay here. There will be other girls coming along." No uniform. I didn't know any regulations, and I really felt left alone, nobody really caring. Finally, after supper, the female who I later found out was a wren, came up to me and she said, "Have you eaten?" And I said, "No." "Well, why didn't you come on board ship to eat?" "Well, nobody told me. Didn't know." So anyway, the officer of the ship took me in and sat me down and gave me all the rules and regulations. And the next day, 2 more girls arrived, and then it ended up there were 25, all from Ontario, a few from Quebec, but 25 of us, untrained, no uniform, and put on an apron and go to work in the kitchen. Anyway, they decided they had to get a uniform for us. They kitted us out, and then the officer of the watch decided we should look, here we are in uniform, we should look like we could march. So they took us down the back alley, and we learned to march left, right, just basic direction. We were there for 3 months, and then they decided that we should go and take our basic training in Galt, Ontario. So we got shipped to Galt, and from Galt we learned to march every direction you could want. And we felt a little insulted because we had learned a lot of that basic stuff. But anyway, you do what you're directed to. And because they said we were cooks, that we could change later, we didn't have to be cooks, we had to take a course on how to be a cook in Cornwallis. So we arrived there, and I remember the train pulling in, and all we girls were looking out. We didn't know what it was all about. And all these sailors lined up, yay, yay, new women. New women, they thought it was great. We were scared, I must say. After I completed my cook's course, I got posted to Stadacona in Halifax, and I was there till the end of the war, over a year there. It changed my life in making me think about me, that unless I looked after myself, that I wasn't going to go anywhere. Experience was something that I didn't have, and so I learned to think on my feet and think of me. Also, to care for my buddy beside me. I just seemed to get stronger.
Well, my dad was a military man. And then everybody in my class in high school, not everybody, but a lot were enlisting. So I went and enlisted too. I had tried the Navy and they wouldn't okay me. My eyesight wasn't good enough. And so then I went to the Air Force, and on getting the test for your eyes, they allowed a bunch of us into the room, and I was down near with the chart, so I simply memorized the chart. And then I got up there and rattled it off, and okay, away you go. Winston Churchill in 1940 asked Mackenzie King to supply 4,000 radar technicians to Britain because they were very, very short of radar people. So that was one thing that interested me, and so I put my name down for that when I went into the Air Force, and that's what from Brandon you were posted to a university, and I took my training at the University of Saskatchewan. And after 4 months there and passing the courses, you got leave, and then you were sent to a secret base of radar in Canada, Clinton, in Ontario. And you were trained I was trained on airborne radar. And then the agreement was that once you were taking all your courses, you were immediately posted overseas, and you were attached to the RAF squadrons, not Canadian. So I was attached to number 85 squadron in West Malling in Kent. And our job was to protect London from the German bombers coming in to bomb London, the night bombers, because it was a night fighter squadron. We were trained on Mark IV radar, and when we got over there, they were on Mark VIII radar. So it advanced that fast. And the third night I was there, the sergeant came in and he said, well, we're short of guards. He said,
you people go out and guard the gate. Don't let anybody wearing a German uniform in here. And he said, be sure and wear your tin hats. So we got out there, and it was a beautiful English evening. The rhododendrons were blooming, so we Canadians, we said, well, what on earth do you need a tin hat for? Well, at 10 o'clock or about that, we found out. They had the shore-based radar, the towers, and they would tell you when they were coming in, what height and what direction, and then the control people there would signal to our squadron and say, on vector such and such, so many aircraft coming in, and up would go our boys. They were all Aussies, all Aussie air crew. The German aircraft came over, and Mark 8 radar was like a flashlight in the nose of the aircraft, and it beamed out, and when you got a blip, the oscilloscope was right in the pilot's compartment, and you got a blip at the top, you knew that he was above you, and then you just simply raised your nose, and when that formed a circle, then he was dead ahead, so all you had to do was speed up, and once you got within 500 yards of the enemy aircraft, the cannon fired automatically. Well, once they fired, the sky lit up like it was noonday. Well, you had a full bomb load. And the next thing you knew, hot metal, hot aircraft parts, hot bodies, they were all following. We ran and got our damn tin helmets. After a while, the sergeant come in one morning and he said, I want volunteers for overseas. And I said, I thought we were overseas. Oh, no, he says, I mean overseas. And he points in some obtuse direction. Anyway, he said, we'll give you 3 weeks leave right away. So Johnny Gowdy from Calgary and myself were the only single ones. The rest were all married out of the 8 that went to that drone. And so we accepted, we volunteered. So we got away on leave. My mother came from Lincolnshire, my father from the north of Scotland. So I had a wonderful time. Came back, and we were posted to Blackpool, and they outfitted us all khaki kit for hot weather. And I said, we're going to the hot place. So then they shipped us to Liverpool, and from there we got on a boat and we went up to the Clyde and formed a convoy. There was quite a number of troop ships, and 3 destroyers and 1 cruiser as escort. And we headed round the north of Ireland, down, and we put in at Sierra Leone, and an English regiment got off, and they went to Africa to fight Rommel. And then we put out to sea again and headed south, and the engines conked out. And the rest of the convoy just sailed off till there were little wee specks on the edge of the horizon. And we were there, dead quiet, sitting not far from the opening to the Med. And we figured, uh-oh, we've had it. That's when I had a little fear. Everybody from my deck, I was 3 decks below the waterline, so we all took our hammocks and went up to the main deck and slept on there. Well, anyway, they got the engines fixed. They were making one hell of a racket, but they got it fixed. And then we set sail at full speed, and we caught up to the convoy in a day and a half. And Cruiser Commodore, he sent a message flat, and it read, Matthew chapter 6, verse 7. Don't quote me on the exact verse, it's 70 years ago. And so somebody ran and got a Bible and looked it up, and it said, the shepherd rejoiceth, for the lost sheep hath returned to the flock. Then I was sent to India, and I was at a station just outside Bombay for a while. We were servicing Sunderlands and so forth for coastal detection of submarines. Then I was sent up to Drigg Road, number 320 maintenance unit. And I spent the whole rest of the war, 2 years, over 2 years, at that station. I tried to get off. No, sir. I couldn't. I wanted to get across the Brahmaputra because then you got the Burma Star. But they wouldn't let me go. I ended up training English radar people after me on the equipment, and I stayed there. They told me later I was supposed to get a couple of stripes or so, but RAF was very slow on doing that.
Thought there's some guys joining the army and then there's a war and then you got to protect the country and the people. So I thought I might as well go too. Not only to see the world, but to help defend the country. Well, I joined up in North Battleford. From there they sent me to Saskatchewan. We got our medical and all that, and then after we passed the medical, they got to give us the uniforms. Later on, they sent us to Regina. From Regina, they kept us there for a while, not too long. And then they sent us to, some of us were sent to Maple Creek, where we took our first part of training. When I finished my first part of training, I transferred to Red Deer as a truck driver. From Red Deer, we finished our second part of the training from Red Deer, and then they sent us overseas. That's in the spring of 43. And we landed in Greenock, that's in Scotland. From there, they transfer us to, that same night, they transfer us to England. They call that place Farnham, I think, not too far from Aldershot. And then we were stationed there right along, and then later on, they bring us out in the country and live in tents. We're trained a lot. How to drive and all that, how to look after your vehicle, and then what we're supposed to do. And we're told that we're not allowed to leave the vehicles in action, to run away from them. If there's something going on, that we cannot run away. We got to stay with our vehicles. If they get hit, well, you're gone. You have to do what they were trained to do. An order is an order regardless what happened to you. Same thing like in the infantry, when we landed in Normandy, we couldn't help people. Some of them might be wounded, but they can't help themselves, so we didn't have time to stop and try to help them. We had orders to be in a certain area at a certain time, so it's up to the driver to get there. They gave us maps. It's not like what we have here. They have towns and highway numbers and all that. We didn't have nothing of that. All they had was numbers all around. You have to read the numbers. You have to understand the number. Then you will find your point. My point was to go towards Bayou. But in a strange country, I didn't know how to look at the numbers to find my points. So I found my points, so I went there. There was one guy helping me, had a load of ammunition. He helped me to unload. We were told to be on our own for 3 days. I don't remember if I ate that first day, and I don't remember if I slept that first night. For 3 days, I was on my own. Everybody, all the truck drivers were on their own for 3 days. Before we left England, we were given a number that we were supposed to meet on a third day. There were a couple of vehicles that never showed up. What happened to them, we don't know. But the rest of us, we met in that point. That's in Normandy. From then on, we just, as usual, we had to go back and forth. Hauling, ammunition, petrol, everything, whatever you're told to haul. One thing, I was hauling some ammunition to a gun pit, artillery gun pit. And then they didn't have any ammunition. They ran out. And then when I got there, they opened up one case, I guess, and then they just put it in their gun, and then they fired, and I got a gun blast. You know, well, they had earplugs, but I didn't have any, huh? We just unloaded. And then they were going to put me in a hospital. I said, no, I'm able to get around without hearing. But after a while, I started hearing again, you know. There's convoys, not only us, but there's convoys with different outfits, yeah? And these guys were flying around upstairs. If they see a convoy coming, they come right down and fire their machine guns on us, you know. But we couldn't run. We had to keep on going. But being scared, well, what can you do? You can't do nothing, you know. I seen two little kids, a little boy and a little girl. Whether they were brother or sister, I don't know. The sun was just coming up. Them two little kids were standing beside the road. The little boy didn't have nothing on. The little girl had a panty on. They were doing this, both crying. They were hungry. Where did they sleep? How did they keep warm? But we couldn't stop. We had to go, huh? I always think about them little kids. Whether they might have a family, maybe grandchildren, or they're still living. So I hope we'll never see that with our kids. You do like to see a person walking around, just skin and bones, yeah? I volunteered for the invasion in Japan, eh? But by the time we got home, all the war was over there, so they didn't send us. Then later on, I volunteered for the Korean War. But the war was over there, so they didn't send us. When I came back from the war, we came on a boat. It took us 5 days. I think they called it New Amsterdam, I think they called it, or New Holland, something like that, the boat, eh? Landed in Halifax. From there, from Halifax, took the train to Regina. From there, in Regina, well, we already got our leave, our papers to come home, eh? So we left there. That was on the 28th of July. And I landed in Regina. And I landed in North Battleford on the 29th of July. You know, I tried to get that grant, $2,320 grant. I tried to get it, I couldn't get it right away until the farm instructor helped me to get it. So I got the $2,300, so about 7-8 years after I got out from the Army, see. And then I went to a dealer in cut knife. He helped me to get that. He lowered his prices on the machinery, huh? I bought a little tractor and a little disc, you know. I was farming. I'd done it on my own. I worked for farmers. I started working when I was 14 years old. I learned a lot from them, huh? With a great deal of education, you don't understand very much. I got to use a dictionary a lot of times in order to understand a word. Here's the way I look at myself, the way I do things, yeah. Planning is something that we learned in the army, to plan. I tell the people here, the young people, they should join the army. Well, 6 weeks or 8 weeks training, they might stay in. They got to learn. They got to learn at the low part and then go up. A few years ago in Ridge, they took me to the front where there was 2 officers. I was sitting with the French people. I didn't know who they were, you know, but later on I found out they were French people, you know. They told me that I got to open the ceremony in my language. So I done that. Then when the ceremony was over, they took me back there again. They told me to say a prayer again in my language to close the ceremony, and I done that. And I've been told that's the first time an Indian was asked to do that. I don't know why me. Why me? Huh? I just happened to be there, I guess. I was the only Indian in that outfit. I got along with the white guys, huh? Because we're doing the same kind of work, you know. I got along with them. I never had any trouble with them. All the way from the time we landed to the time the war's over. I never had no trouble with them, you know, so. Because we know that we have to work together in order to get what we were fighting for. Eh? When I came home, it wasn't the same. Some people didn't understand us. Some people even said that I don't belong to this band. Just because I joined the army, eh? Because they don't understand. They don't understand what was happening, what was going on. They don't understand us why we joined the army. They told me that they're going to kick me out from the reserve. They had a lawyer one time. They were going to kick the Fables out. They brought a lawyer, and I told the lawyer, where's the papers that he got? The first treaty pages. He didn't have them, and I had mine. 1876, I got that, and people quietened down then. They haven't said anything ever since. If I fought for the country, if I fought for the people, to defend for what they have, everybody's got it. Not only me or my family. It's for the country. Eh? I put my life on the line, and will I come back or not? Well, either we get killed to protect the country and the people. The government is not doing that. Eh? In fact, they cut off my old age pension. I can't work, so I don't make any money. I just got to live on the pensions. But they cut it off, so I got to start hitting the food banks. That's the way they handle us. That's the government. I asked for some assistance here in the reserve. They won't give it to me. I seen people starving when I was overseas. Now they won't make us starve. And they always say that people got to eat good and all that, you know. Some people, they don't recognize us. Some people do. Why? What we did for them in order for them to have what they have. Same thing like in the years back, we went to Belgium. The people that we were talking to, some of them, they didn't recognize the people from here. But we told them they didn't have anything while the Nazis were in control. They were controlling them. We had to come there to take the Nazis out so they could have what they were supposed to have. Eh? And we told them that there will never be anyone that's able to do that unless we support each other. So people join up, join hands, you know, all over the world. to fight them three countries, Italians, Japan, and Germany. Other countries joined up, huh? They joined hands to get what they want. I hope the people will come to understand, not only from us people, but the whites as well. They will have to understand the veterans, the white veterans. Because we work together. We got to work together to get something done. If we don't work together, we're going to start fighting again. And no one country is ever going to rule the world. No one country. They tried it, but they couldn't do it. All they will do is make a mess and make people suffer.
I was with the Saskatchewan 1st Canadian Division when I was an air gunner in Sicily in Italy. Oh, Sicily is a rough country. Hot too. The sun is right overhead. Yeah, it's near Africa, you know. First we were fighting against Italians. They were with the Germans. But when we got to their country, they quit. They turned around and go with us, you know. Me and another guy scout this place. There's a stone building, and we were supposed to report where the location is. Before I went to scouting, I got wounded in the head here, and I couldn't hear for 2 days. We were pinned down there. We were surrounded. Yeah, we fought all night there. We couldn't get out, you know. And then I had ammunition in my pack sack and my front there too. I fired them all. Yeah. Then I went under the table. It was getting morning, you know. We ran out of ammunition. So anyway, I didn't know how many we killed. Anyway, quite a few. And towards morning, they were poking guys, which one they live, you know. They came to me, I was under the table. They poked me on my ribs, you know. I had to move. They brought me in outside there, you know. But I couldn't hear nothing. They put me in a different cell. They had a kind of an office in front lines, you know. And then I stayed there for 2 days, and all at once my hearing came. Yeah. And the guard came and get me and in front of the officers. When I went in, the officers, they salute me. I salute back. Respect, you know. And then the officer said, who was on your right? Who was on your left? I told him, me no speak English. And he said, you know what is Manitou? He said, yeah, I heard of him, I never met him. That means, Manitou means God, you know. I got mixed up there, I thought I was talking English. Yeah. I asked him, how you know that? He said, I used to be a bowhog in the 30s, he said. Before the war, he said, we crossed the whole of the country. He said, we honored we catch up brave, he said. You guys are good fighters. If you had the guns, they wouldn't take your country. They feed me good, you know. Big basket of wine and lots of meat, you know. And they told me we go to Austria from there, you know. We took us in the trucks at night, and we fast travel all night. Took us 2 days to get to Austria. And then from there, we boarded boxcars, you know, 15 a boxcar, prisoners from all over. Boxcars are small over there, not like here. So we traveled 4 days without water. And they gave us garlic to eat and a lot of stuff like that, but no water. I'm pretty near starver without water. Same with with my friends. That last night I prayed to the Creator, ask Him, if you should take me to your kingdom or make a way so we can kill our thirst. Then after I prayed, I lay down, I sleep. Towards morning, we were running on the train. I wake up. Here, there's a window about that long, but long. There's icicles in there. She gave me icicles to get our thirst. We got to a prison camp, Stalag 7A. It's near Munich. There was dogs, you know, police dogs and everything. And we went there, we thought it was Christmas morning. Yeah, 1944. All we had was a bowl of soup and half a chocolate bar for Christmas. I was there over 3 months in the prison camp. They used to take us in a long room, you know, take our clothes off and put a hose on us. Real hot water, you know, just to take the fleas out. Here we took a chance. They took us outside, you know, and it was storming, blowing snow. We were walking there and guards were a little bit in front. This guy, this Mongolian, he was my friend in the prison camp. We didn't understand each other, but we make signs. I told him, me and you. He said, okay. As we were walking, we went. We had a blanket, each one blanket anyway. Yeah. Oh, it was storming. They couldn't track us. Maybe they lost us. Anyway, we traveled for 2 days without eating, and we sleep under the snow. Yeah, it was warm. This guy knew, he knows how to survive, I guess. After 2 days, we approached a big valley. We went to this farmer. We asked him something to eat, you know. Oh, sure, he said. He gave us lots to eat. I pretty die of walking. Then it was April. It was nice weather. And there was a town there before we got there. They had white sheets. That means surrendering, you know. This is in Germany, you know. And Americans were coming. We run out there. Americans were shooting us. we got mixed up with the Germans, you know. They wanted to surrender. So anyway, we ran to another building. It was a stone barn. There was some animals still in there, yeah. And towards noon, here a big tank came in near the door. Yeah, it was Americans. Yeah. So me and him, we went out. We went out with the Germans too, you know. And they asked me where you guys come from. You know, I was dressed with a Russian coat that my friend lent me his coat, you know. It was sheepskin lined. Yeah, it was warm. And then he thought I was Russian, but I told him no, these are some Russian army, that Mongolian, you know. Yeah. So anyway, they couldn't ask him questions, and they told me, "You just stay here," he said. "There's other people coming. They'll look after you," he said. Okay. Sure enough, pretty soon they arrived. They built big tops, everything, and tents, shower, where you're going to have a shower. I never changed clothes for 3 months, you know. The war is just about over, you know. And they sent me to hospital for 4 weeks. They got x-rays of me. My guts were shrunk without eating. I wouldn't die of thirst and hunger. I never gained weight, and I can't eat a big meal, just a little bit.
People in Canada value life. You know, we spend billions of dollars on health. We value life. Over in those countries, there's not the same value. They do things to humans you wouldn't believe. Hitler was, if he got England, the next one was a world conquer business.
There was German submarine in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. That's awful close to Saskatchewan when you think of that. If us Canadians hadn't gone overseas, the Nazis would have come to England and across, eh? So I think it was just a matter of wanting to protect the Canada, the nice living, the good living that we have, the abundance of food. There's so much in Canada.
In the spring of '42, when I was in the hospital, and when I got out of hospital, I came home here, and I was appalled at the attitudes, some of the attitudes that I experienced, because I knew that the people in Britain were just within a thread of losing. We were in our encounters with that I had been exposed to, you know, we weren't even a fair opposition for the submarines. They just practically played with us like a cat playing with a mouse.
The enemy was at least 2 to 3 years ahead of us in everything that they did, their equipment, their everything. And so you knew that we hoped to catch up. But I think when states entered the war, when they actually entered, you had a feeling sooner or later we would win, or if there is a winner.
When we hit El Alamein, the Germans, their attitude was they'd take their top pilots, very well-trained pilots, they'd send them over to Russia, they'd be over there for a while, then they might be in France, and then the next thing they'd send them out to the Middle East. Well, these German pilots, some of them had over 300 kills when they retired finally. And there's one person, his name was Marseille, he was a German ace. He'd shot down 157 Spitfires and Hurricanes during the Alamein. He was probably the top ace in the Middle East. But they had these other people come out with all kinds of kills. If our group had 30 or 40, that was the tops. We were in the top flying Spitfires at that time. And I give Neville Duke credit. He spotted large numbers of German transports carrying supply to the Germans in Tunisia. He called down to Wing Commander Gleed. There's transport right on the deck. Go after them. Gleed said, I can't see anything. So Neville Duke and R6 went down and got stuck into these transports and shot down, I think, 5 on the occasion. They were big Savoy 79s, different planes like that. And anyhow, that started something. All of a sudden, the Americans and the other squadrons started going after these planes, and it was just slaughter, shooting them down.
We were based out of Scapa Flow, which is the base of the home fleet, the British home fleet. And we were attached to the British Navy. We were Canadian ships, but we were attached to the British Navy. And so I served from there up to Russia, and that was most of my service was that. And we were disengaged from the convoys to go down to the invasion. And we went down about 2 weeks ahead of the invasion and went up and down the French coast and shelled every light that we could see and so forth, just to stir the coast up. I mean, that was the part of the strategy. And then we took the minesweepers ahead of the troops and swept the channels. And we were in position about 1 o'clock in the morning, and the troops came in about 5. And so I was there for that in Juno Beach, and then you look with awe at what's happening. I mean, as the numbers, as I've heard, 4,000 aircraft coming over, all with black and white stripes under their wings so that we wouldn't shoot at them, and 4,000 ships. It's mind-boggling. The organization there, you have to say, well, some son of a gun knew what he was doing when he put all this together, because it was amazing how it came, and the troops came up when the unloading came, and then they came off the bigger troop ships, and they went into the landing craft, and the landing craft would circle till they got whatever it was, 10 or 12 of them, to make a wave of an attack, and then they'd off to the beach. And then the Mulberry Harbor, nobody knew anything about that, and that came in. And that was an amazing sight to see those big sections of that harbor come in, and then they just opened the cocks and sunk it down, and there was a ready-made jetty. We had an army captain of artillery on board with us, and they landed those paratroops and so forth, and they were artillerymen. And they called fire in on themselves. They spotted targets and so forth and called fire. And so we would shell with this, under the direction of this captain of artillery, we would shell in these positions. Now, as I recall, we lost 57 contacts that first morning. That is, they would draw in fire on themselves. 10 minutes, 15 minutes later, they were captured. And you'd have to find another one that was signaling and so forth. And we could only shell so far because we were 4 or 5 inch shells. So we could, by noon, the troops had got beyond our range. And then the big boys come in behind with the 16-inch guns, and they started firing. Then we come back to the beach, and of each evening we'd pull out and sweep the channel for E-boats and so forth, because the E-boats would harass our shipping and so forth, so we'd chase them at nights. And then we went down and they started to leapfrog the invasions down the coast towards, or up the coast, I guess you'd say, to the Netherlands. And we sort of took the seaside of that. And the big 6-inchers could get at us off the land, but we couldn't fire back, so we used to. The Germans have a firing habit of firing under, over, and in the middle. And so they'd fire twice and then we'd move ahead, and we avoided it, never got hit. But it's interesting to sit there all day under gunfire and you can't do anything about it. Our boys took a hell of a slapping. I mean, those first waves going in, I mean, you could just, they hit that beach and they were, you'd look over and wonder how many that were going to move again, you know. But of course the big battle took place later around Caen, when the Germans finally got their forces in order and fought back.
I guess before we got to Fort Caen was a bottleneck. It was a problem, and we made a bad mistake of bombing it, so the place was rubble and very difficult to get through in terms of vehicles, our carriers, or even infantry on foot. There weren't many Germans left in there, and there probably weren't many when we bombed it, but it created an obstacle for us. And then when we started down the road to Falaise in August, and I'll think hard about the date, 9th, I guess, of August, the divisional commander had been wounded, and we had one casualty back in the wagon lines, I think, well, one that I know of. And then on the 14th is when we really got bombed. By our air support, we literally sat there and were bombed, and there's nothing we could do about it. Troops were tempted to shoot at them, obviously. We never know exactly what happened. I think somebody bombed short to start with, and then everybody said, guess we go. You could look up and see them coming down right at you, and I think it was the fact that we were so helpless. There was no way of communicating directly to the aircraft. The report of the short bombing went all the way back to England before they could turn it off. And subsequently they arranged for signal detachments to be with forward troops, so that if there was support from aircraft directly above, there was communication from that signal unit that was with the infantry to the people that were flying up above. We got it. It was bad, and I say, in addition to equipment losses and people losses, little problem with morale. You know, these are supposed to be helping us. So we were very happy the next time we got air support. They didn't go over the top. They went this way. It stunk to high heaven. I can still close my eyes and see horses turned up with their feet up in the air. The Germans had a lot of horse-drawn transport. And, you know, when they were bombed and shelled and killed, there were, dead horses. And let's face it, this was August, hot, stinky, flies. It was a mess.
All the Canadian warships had a doctor. Normally you don't have a doctor, you just have a sick bay attendant. The Dr. Gould, he was examining us all. Anyway, this fella came on the ship that morning. He hadn't been 24 hours on the ship. Now we knew something was wrong with this guy because he was in the Carly float, in the middle of the Carly float, and he was doing a lot of moaning. And when the doctor examined him, he had his right leg was crushed. So the doctor says, I'm going to have to take that leg off. We're standing on the deck of the tank landing craft. It's a steel deck, and there's no place to sit down. There's 60 guys there, eventually getting onto that, and there's no room in the quarters. They're very small quarters for the crew. Only 3 of a crew on the tank landing craft. Well, they bring him out on put the hammock down on the steel deck, put him on the deck, and the doctor, it's almost unbelievable, he amputated that guy's leg, and I was standing, there was no place to sit down. I was standing about from here to that wall, you know, and we all witnessed this operation. Guys hold him down, and they give him some rum, and but they had no anesthetic, no chloroform. So the doctor, all he had was a meat saw, a butcher knife, and an ordinary needle and thread, and he took that leg off, and I never. When he went to work on the leg, he's right down there. That guy let out a scream I still hear. I never thought a noise like that could come out of a human being. There's a crash landing boat came out, and they picked up the worst wounded. They got him ashore, the guy, his leg, and we were told after that they got him to the hospital, and the doctors there examined that amputation. They couldn't improve on it. It was absolutely, but he and a lot of the guys were in the hospitals over there. Some got home for Christmas, and some were there almost a year. They were so badly wounded.
The Germans were always around, but we never thought too much of that. We just had a job to do, and just like anybody else, we were trained to do it, and so that was a good thing. And the only time we were up in Eindhoven, and we spent the time up there, and that was the winter. That was one of the coldest winters I think Europe at that particular time had, and our armies and everything was at a standstill. We couldn't bring up supplies one thing another. The Germans were more or less the same thing. If they only knew that we were just at a stagnant. So we sat in Eindhoven there for maybe a couple of months, and very few wounded were coming into our camp and one thing another. And on New Year's morning of '45, we were just going to go out to the camp and one thing another, and we were stopped because we had to cross the tarmac, and there was a bunch of tippies ready to take off on it. And then all of a sudden we heard this racket and one thing another, and we're in the back of this truck and happened to look out. We just thought some of our own pilots were still celebrating New Year's. But when we seen the planes coming around, we seen the black crosses on them, we knew they were Germans. So we kind of hit the deck underneath the trucks, and that was the worst place we could be, because that's where the Germans were coming in from the east. And of course, we're facing the Sunday, and they did a good job, by shooting us up. And luck would have it, if we had stayed in our truck, it was about the only vehicle around there wasn't even touched. It was amazing. But every other truck and planes and stuff like that were pretty, and they kept coming at us one thing another, and they did a good job. And I can remember helping another chap try to get one of the pilots out of one of these tiffies, and of course he was dead. And we watched how the planes were coming around the field, and so we figured we better get out of here. And we ran, and I think I broke the 1 mile record, because I don't know how I ran so quick over some obstacles, landed in a pothole with water. Couldn't do nothing to see these planes coming over. But later on, everything, then we went over to our camp, grabbed the ambulances. We had about 4 or 5, and I was like driving, got one of the medics and go around the field, pick up these wounded, our wounded. And, at the end of the day, that you sat back and one thing and another, like we were finished. And I can remember going in, and it's the first time, like, went in the mess hall, I get something to eat, and I was by myself. There's other chaps there, and I kind of broke down, and I cried. And that's the first time I asked for my mom. It was a sad part. I had nobody, and of course I was still a kid, and I guess it was just, everything was going on, and that was a terrible day. I can always remember that particular day, and I hope, not to go through that again.
In the war, I never wanted to brag about it. People suffer. Kids, nothing to eat. They're walking around begging for something to eat. But we had to go on, They destroyed their homes, everything. I seen one woman killed and a little baby there crying. I puke. Oh, terrible things I seen. I hope that never go like that in our country.
War is hell for 10 minutes and boredom for another month. I think talking to veterans, it's still the most important part of their life. It was that period of 2, 3, 4, 5 years that was the most important thing in their life. I guess that's what it is. It grew me up. It took me from a callow youth with no objectives and lazy as a cut cat to a grown man and willing to take responsibility. It's often said, the statement is that we became a country in World War I and World War II. Yeah, that's true. That's true. The country pulled together, and everybody had a son or a brother or somebody in the services. So, everybody had a part to play in the war. A lot of them come back and they don't make the adjustment. They've been shaken up. We now have all sorts of fancy names for it, but they just don't get back online, and they get divorced, or they suicide, or they drink, or they do this and that and the other thing. It's very hard on young men. And still do, and I teach in the university, and I've had young men come into my classes that have been over in Bosnia and so forth, and some of them are pretty badly shaken up.
In Canada, I'm terribly concerned that we may drift away from keeping people prepared. From the experience that I had, the whole process of going to sea and fighting the sea in that kind of a ship with which nobody had any experience. They didn't know what it could do or if it could do anything. And they just said, well, this is your job, go and do it. And that's not the way we should fight a war. And I just hope that that Canada will maintain their technological capabilities so that we can hold our own and express an opinion that's backed up with some resources.
All the corvettes were named after cities and towns. Of course, Regina, Saskatoon, Weyburn. I was sent to train as an ERA apprentice. The ERA is a rating that runs the engines on the ship. When you're at sea, he's on the throttle. Any repair work or maintenance, minor maintenance work, he can't do too much. He's responsible for all that, It was a 21-month apprenticeship. There's a lot to learn about an engine room. And we took side courses in electricity and chemistry and mathematics and stuff like that. But you had to know every pipe, every valve in an engine room, and there's lots of them. There was over 100 of us fellas together, and they give us a choice. You could go on the baby flat tops, we're out at the West Coast, or you could go on the coast boats. And I made a choice to go to Halifax, and there would be about 18 or 20 of us out of that group wanted to go to Halifax. And I was a fifth class ERA. That's the lowest rank of it. And I worked for 4 months in the dockyard. They had a gang of ERAs would do maintenance work on the Canadian corvettes that would come in and tie up for a few days. And I did a lot of work on there and worked in the machine shop. You were under the supervision of a chief. Later, got called into the chief's engineer's officer and said that they're quite satisfied with the work, and you being selected, it's a voluntary, but you being selected to go to the Royal Navy, overseas to the Royal Navy for training on engine room turbines in cruisers. Well, that was I said, that's for me, you know. And I went overseas on the Empress of Scotland, and we went to Greenock. That's the Canadian Navy base in Scotland, and I wasn't there 12 hours till I was drafted to the Regina. I never got my training at the Royal Navy. They had to go to Canadian corvettes. There was 21 of them down there for the invasion. You see, this would be mid-May, somewhere in there, and in 1944. A lot was happening. A guy like me couldn't imagine it, you know. Particularly when you're in the engine room, you don't get any news. You just track at time. You go on your watch, you try to get something to eat and sleep, and that's it. But you got an occasional peek out, you know. And I'm pretty sure we were on a group that was circling the Warspite. There was several ships. We were just going around in great big circles, maybe a quarter of a mile or so off the Warspite to intercept any torpedo or anything like that. And I think that was D-Day +3. I think they were going pretty strong even then. Troops going over and different like landing craft. And the likes of that. It was August the 8th, 1944. We had been for several weeks going up and down the English Channel on escort and convoy duties, all kinds of freighters going over to France. We picked up a convoy out of Cardiff, Wales, in the Bristol Channel. And we were heading like west towards Land's End, go around Land's End, and go over to Cherbourg, France. Well, we sailed all down the Bristol Channel that day. They're quite slow, these convoys. And about 8:45, maybe in there, somewhere in there, we felt a rumble in the water. So I just come off watch. I just washed my hands, felt that rumble. I was down in the mess. And I grabbed my life jacket, came up, and all kinds of our crew that were on watch or anything were on the quarterdeck, that's the rear, watching a freighter go down. And we stood there, and our ship was stopped. And we watched the freighter, Ezra Weston was the name of it, going down by the bow. And as the angle got sharper, all the deck cargo started rolling off. trucks, cars, jeeps. What a sight to see, And we were not standing too far off her. There's a leading seaman, Malone, on there. He was in the group watching the activity, the freighter sinking, and I didn't know where to go, so I stood by what would be my action station, which was a telephone on the bulkhead. Malone came over and lifted up the bulk off the phone, and it was direct to the bridge. Requested permission to set the depth charge safe. There would be about 6 depth charges. And he went over there and he did something on the end of them and set them safe. Was not hardly a minute or two after that, the torpedo hit us. And that's when the ship blew up, went in the air, I guess, and landed in the water. Had he not done that, we'd all been dead. Those depth charges would have went off right underneath us. And have you ever seen a depth charge go off? They tremendous explosions, yeah. So we tried to get him some recognition for what he did. We thought he should have the Victoria Cross, but we didn't. We couldn't get it. They said he was just doing his job. Malone, of course, died. He's buried in Padstock in Cornwall. He was washed ashore about 3 days later. Less than 30 seconds, the ship disappeared. It must have hit the ammunition locker and the boilers at the same time. Nobody got out of the engine room or the boiler room. They all died in there. 30 didn't come back. I was on the quarterdeck there, and I remember the great white sheet, and I didn't hear anything. And the next thing I knew, in the water, considerable. The ship had gone. A lot of fellas died from hypothermia. I was not far from it myself. I didn't know at the time, but I was hanging on to a Carly float, and the water was bitter cold. And and after a considerable length of time, I felt sort of comfortable, And I said to the fellow beside me, "We must have got into a warm stream of water." "Yeah," he says, "I think it feels good." And I felt, and then I was going to go to sleep, And he says, "No, Don, we can't go to sleep. No, don't go to sleep." If I had went to sleep, that would be the end of me. An American tank landing craft coming back from France. So we had, on our life jackets, we had little orange helmets, toques, with a light in it, the battery in here. And they could see all the little lights. So they come, picked us all up. They're not very maneuverable, and it took quite a while to pick us all up. And we were all black with oil, And they tried to get it off us. An officer from the freighter come over to me, and he opened up a club bag, and all I had on was my overalls that I'd been wearing in my watch on the engine room, and I dropped that, and I stand there naked, and he gave me a big white towel, and says, "Wipe yourself down as well as you can," Which it is, and he digs into his club bag, brings out a pair of long woolen winter long johns, and they comes out with a couple of woolen stockings, and then he takes off his coat. And it was a big winter coat, and reached down below my knees and made me put that on. And there was an Air Force station not far from where they landed us on the Cornwall coast. There was trucks and everything waiting for us. And they took us to maybe a couple of miles to this Air Force place. The only regret I had was the fellas that I lost, some good friends. You know, they 30 of them. There's quite a few. And never saw them again. Yeah. Even the guy that relieved me less than a half an hour before in the engine room, he died too. I think there's a dozen or so of us were okay to go home. We're in good enough physical condition to go home. I was very fortunate myself. Just had lacerations around the face and a sore hip. And here, lo and behold, it's a Queen Mary. They're putting us on the Queen Mary. Oh boy, this is going to be something. And I had a nice cabin on the A deck, and I thought, this is strange. Where, the ratings all go down below, Anyway, we were there a couple of days, and this evening about supper time, there's a big commotion down on the dock. All these big limousine-type cars come up, and people getting out of them and coming on the Queen Mary. And lo and behold, Churchill gets out of one of the cars. We all recognized him right away. Everybody recognized him. This was a special trip for Churchill and his staff coming out to the Second Quebec Conference in September '44. And Churchill and his staff were no sooner on the Queen Mary than it took off. And it went all up the docks, all kinds of ships, passengers and everything. This was a big port, and all blowing their horns and saluting the Queen Mary. That's the senior ship in the fleet. Anyway, they take off, and we head for Halifax. It took 4.5 days. But every afternoon, just after lunch, we were the only people on the Queen Mary, except Churchill and his staff. Every afternoon for 4.5 days, Churchill and his daughter come out on the promenade deck, which was roped off just for them. And he'd give us a V for victory and like good day or good morning. And he doffed his cap, I remember once, always a big cigar. And we saw him every day. All the survivors were invited by the Navy out to the commissioning. It's up alongside the jetty, the brand new Regina. The politicians were all up on the platform, but we were all up in seat benches. Anyway, they went through this pretty formal ceremony, and the crew were all marched on. A couple of admirals were making the speeches and, and stuff like that. I don't remember them smashing a bottle or anything. But anyway, then we all went back to the hotel, and they had a real big banquet. I always remember that because I was asked to say grace. So I felt pretty good about that. We all went out just after dinner and went on the Regina to give us Regina baseball caps, In fact, the skipper handed them out. He had a great big box of them. And we headed out into the bay, and that was for about 3 hours. And I was being accompanied by the chief ERA, and he took me my son and I, every place, even in the engine room. Nobody else got in the engine room except my son and I. The crew still comes to Regina every once in a while. For example, the crew came you got the keys to the city or freedom of the city, and we were invited down there for that. The ship's company was there, and Doug Archer was the mayor then, and the Doug Archer and I cut the ceremonial cake. It was the commanding officer's ceremonial sword. When we cut the cake, all the blade was covered with icing, and of course you couldn't get it back in the scabbard. And the last I remember was some of the ladies that had been with the cake were busy trying to clean this icing off.
In the 30s, I had the opportunity to go up in a plane. I went to school at Laureley, and most of those schools had an old Waterman Waterbury furnace, and it needed some repair. So one Saturday afternoon, the repairman from Waterbury rented a plane, and the plane landed out in a stubble field near Laureley. And then while the furnace was being repaired, the pilot was taking people up in a flight. He was charging $5, of course. $5 bills were pretty scarce then, and I didn't have $5, so I asked my dad if he could spare $5. He said no. He said, I don't have $5, but there was a red and white store there, and a fellow by the name of Harry Town. And he said, well, if I loan you $5, can you pay me back? And I said, well, I got a little trap line, and I've got some weasels. How many have you got? I said, well, I got about 5 now. He said, what do you think you can get for them? And I said, well, 2 of them are pretty good size. I might be able to get about $8 or $9 for my ship. And he said, okay, here's $5. He said, so when you sell your weasel skins, he said, you go. But I'll never forget that. It was in January, and it was a cold day in an open cockpit, and I damn near froze. But that's when I first got my first desire to fly. We were about 25 miles west of Melville. So the way the crow flies, it would probably be about 60 miles from Yorkton. In late 1940, they opened the service flying station at Yorkton, and they were flying Harvards. So, of course, there was always Harvards flying over the farm, doing aerobatics and so on. Of course, that time we didn't have a tractor. We didn't have a car. So I took my grade 9 and 10 by correspondence, so I stayed on the farm for about a year helping my dad, driving these horses. And it soon got whenever Harvard would come over to their barracks, I'd stop the horses and watch them. And it got to the point where I didn't have to tell them to woo, they would actually automatically stop. So I spent several hours watching them. That's where I really got the bug to fly. But in order to be a pilot, you had to have your grade 12. So in the fall of 41, they were getting short of bomber pilots in Britain. So they opened what they call pre-enlistment schools. So if you passed a medical and an aptitude test, then you could enroll in this pre-enlistment school. And if you were accepted, then you were still in civics, but you got paid by the Air Force. In Canada, they had the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan here because the land, there was lots of land to build aerodromes, and the weather was conducive for flying, and all the towns were lit up, your aircraft were lit up. When you got overseas, everything was blacked out. All the houses were blacked out. The only time you could see the aerodrome on the flare path is when you got lined up with the runway, because they're all hooded. And there were thousands killed in England, and basically one of the reasons was the conditions were so much more difficult. And the weather was bad too. There was a lot of cloud. And most pilots going into Bomber Command, they went on what they called a BAT course, a beam approach training, for 8 to 10 weeks. And you did mostly instrument flying. That was to prepare you for operations, because lots of times you'd be flying at night. You have no navigation lights. Your cockpit lights were dimmed. And of course you'd be flying in cloud, and there were numerous collisions. You can imagine whether it be 600-800 aircraft or 1,000 aircraft on a raid, and they had to be over the target within a space of half an hour. The aircraft would be close together, and if they were evading a night fighter attack, of course, you'd be at right angles, doing your corkscrew, and there were hundreds of collisions, and not too many survived those. And all the planes were camouflaged too, to blend in with the countryside. That was another thing too, because sometimes you'd be coming into land and you could almost land on another plane without realizing it was there. 5 crews went to the squadron the day that I arrived. We were there about 4 or 5 days, and then all the pilots go on what they call the second dicky trip. So I went with a flying officer, Philbin, and we went to Amiens, which was a V-2 bombing site at a railway junction we were bombing. It was as far as I was concerned, we didn't get attacked by night fighters, and I went for experience. So when we came back and were coming into land, I was standing behind him. And he saw me and he told me to go back to the crash position, which is by the main spar. Well, I didn't go. I just stepped back a little bit so he couldn't see me. And we landed, and then, unbeknownst to the crew, they had a 500-pound bomb hung up. Although the bombing switch was off, the bomb was still live. And I'm standing behind the pilot. The next thing I know, I'm lying on the runway. When the bomb dropped off and hit the runway, it exploded. And it cut the aircraft, blew the back part of the aircraft away, killed the 2 gunners, and their wings and that were, and motors were sitting on the thing. And then, of course, I thought I was bleeding to death. I felt well wet, and of course what was happening, all the gas lines were punctured. So I picked myself up, and I suppose you're in shock. We never heard the bomb. And it woke up all the personnel on the station. Blew a big hole in the runway, so that was my initiation. I had a phosphorus burn on my arm, and I think what happened, they don't know how. My battle dress wasn't burned, but I had this phosphorus burn on my arm. But they didn't know at the time at the station. They sent me on leave, and it just looked like a scrape. But then it turned out that I got gangrene in it, so then they sent me to Basingstoke, which was a big army hospital in the First World War. Well, they were so busy with tank cars, they couldn't look after me. I ended up at East Grinstead. So then I was there for about 3.5 months. So when I got back to the squadron, I figured, well, my crew will have another pilot, but I suppose they kept thinking I'd be back any day. And so when I got back, they were still there waiting for me. So then we did a couple of orientation trips, and we went back on ops. And on our 13th trip, the lorry was taking us out to the aircraft, and it was raining. We'd been scrubbed about 3 times, and finally about midnight we told to take off. And I noticed my rear gunner was very quiet, and I said to him, "Well, Kenny, do you not feel well?" He said, "Well, Skipper, do you know what trip this is?" And I said, "Yeah, it's number 13. He said, "Do you mind if we call it 12A? I said, "Why?" He said, "I don't like 13. It's not a good number." And I said, "Sure." I said, "We'll call it 12A, Kenny." Well, I often wonder if he had a premonition, because just when we got the okay to go, I was the 5th aircraft off. And I'm barely down the runway. The runways aren't very long in those bomber stations. And I'm 3/4 of the way down the runway. There was a terrible bang, and I lost all power in the starboard inner. Of course, as soon as that happens, you got the other engines full bore, so the aircraft swerved off the runway. And it's pitch black, there's no lights, and I knew that the other aircraft were still in the marshalling track. So I knew I might crash into them. I didn't know if I could stop, so I shoved the throttles through the gate. You got extra power. Well, when you do that, these 2 engines were full bore, and the aircraft just went like this, so I knew we were going to go in. So I straightened it out. I remember yelling to the crew to brace themselves. We're going in, and I don't remember anymore. I got over the aircraft that were loaded with bombs, and about 1/4 mile off the drome, we crashed into a big stone wall surrounding a farmhouse. Unfortunately, our bomb load that night had delayed fuses on them. And the bombs didn't explode when we actually crashed. But I don't remember the crash. My bomb aimer he didn't die immediately, but he died on the way to the hospital. When we hit, he went forward into the instrument panel, and one of the things went into his forehead, and he got a severe brain damage, so he died on the operating table. And I came to probably half an hour later. And I guess some of the crew pulled me out of the wreck, I don't remember. We went on leave for about 10 days. I had a broken nose and stitches in my face. We went back flying, and on the 17th trip, my wireless operator, I don't know whether he went to sleep, but he missed a diversion. So I came all the way back to Crofton. I was the only aircraft in 6th Group that came back. So I didn't have too much fuel left, and they told me to stand by. And finally they said, well, the only drome open is at Sylhet on the west coast on the RBC. Well, I knew I'd never get there. So I thought, well, I can't bail out where there's still some fuel in, so I waited till one engine quit, and then I gave orders for the crew to bail out. We were still flying in cloud and rain. They all bailed out, and it was an experience for me because being the pilot, you have to be the last to bail out. So by this time, the second engine had quit, and I was losing height, and I'm not very tall, but I remember reaching up to get out the seat because the Halifax had 3 levers, the one for the bomb doors, one for the undercarriage, and one for the flaps, and they come up like this. So I slid over, figured I was clear, and I let myself go, and the lever caught between my harness and my leg, and I was dangling there. And I don't know how to this day. I remember thrashing around because I couldn't reach back up. And finally something gave way, and I went tumbling down the 3 steps where you bail out the front end. And then I hit my elbow, fell out there, and I found my parachute ring. I pulled the thing. I remember seeing the tail of the aircraft go by. I pulled it. Nothing happened. I thought, oh, it's not going to open. And finally it opened, and I really have no sensation of falling in a parachute. I just went like this. I came back and I hit the ground, so I probably bailed out about 600 or 700 feet. My 2 gunners and I finally got together by blowing our whistles after the fog cleared. We walked all day and never saw a soul. 7 o'clock at night, we came across a shepherd and his wife. They were tending sheep. They had a summer home with a mud floor and bacon eggs from the ceiling, so they made us bacon and eggs, and then an RAF lorry came, picked us up, took us to Penrith, and the rest of my crew were there. So when we got back to the station, the medical officer, commanding officer said, well, we better send this crew to London to the Central Medical Board and get their nerves checked out. So we went to London, spent 3 days there. Being from the farm, I didn't know there was such a thing as psychiatrists and psychologists, but I soon discovered that they existed. And the end result was when we got back to the station, they called me in, and the commanding officer and the medical officer were there, and they said, well, the medical board have determined that your crew, they're not fit to fly anymore. They can't do an adequate job. So although they've only done 17 trips, we're going to give them credit for a tour. But if you and your rear gunner want to fly, you're still fit to fly. But if you want to go back to Canada, you can do so. So I got hold of Kenny, my rear gunner, and I told him what the story was. And I remember Kenny saying to me, well, Skipper, if the rest of the squadron know that we're fit to fly and we don't fly, they'll think we're cowards. I said, boy, Kenny, we wouldn't want to think that. We better get another crew. Well, at that time, there were lots of odds and sods, you know, that it might have been a sick bay. For some reason, their crew went on ops. The crew never came back. So they finally got another crew for me. So I remember the navigator came to me. His name was Pappy Edwards. He was a good friend of my navigator's. And he said, Crash, can I finish my tour with you? I've only got 3 trips to do. Well, I said, you know what my record is, Pappy? oh, he said, I know you can fly. Those weren't your fault. He said, I'd like to fly with you. So we, by that time, the 41 was converted to Canadian Lynx. They were built in Montreal. Beautiful aircraft. So we had about 4 or 5 hours sitting in the cockpits in different positions, and then we went on short cross-country, did some air-to-sea firing, and then we went on ops. And the first trip that we did on ops, of course, my luck, we got diverted. Couldn't get back to base, and we had to land on Fido. You know, Fido, I don't know if you ever heard of it, but when a station is fogged in, they have these 2 gas lines on either side of the runway, and they pump high-octane gas through them. It's got holes in these pipes, and they set fire to it. And the heat from this gasoline disperses the fog up to about 500 feet. But in order to get on the runway, you have to use your Morse code. And I used that when I was doing my beam approach training, and it was a year and a half later that I had to use it. And you know, I'd forgotten which was right and which was left, and I was in the circuit for about 15 minutes before I got it figured out. But I finally got it figured out, and I got lined up with the runway, and I looked at my altimeter, and I was still 1,000 feet, 800 feet, and they're still in fog, and then about 600 feet, you break through the fog, and there's 2 walls of fire, so you think, well, boy, you better keep this aircraft between these 2 walls. So that was my first trip in a Lancaster, and it was a big American drone at Tuddenham. So then we had a breakfast there, a beautiful breakfast and a beautiful mess. We went back to our base and were there 2 days, and we went to Duisburg in the Ruhr. That had been bombed numerous times. We were on the bombing run, and I had a new crew. I heard a lot of noise, and the rear gunner yelled at me, and he said, "Skipper, there's a Halifax shooting at us." I said, "Are you sure?" He said, "Yeah, I can see him. He's shooting at us. What'll I do?" Well, I said, if it's a Halifax, I said, maybe we should shoot back. Well, about that time, the shooting had stopped. But we got hit with flak, and 1 engine caught fire. But my engineer got that out. We're on the bombing run. Dropped the bombs. Went to close the bomb doors, and we only got them partly closed. Got back to base, went to put the wheels down, and I only got 1 wheel. I didn't realize at the time, but when this Halifax shot at us, all the hydraulic lines were down the port side, and they punctured the hydraulic lines. So the engineer tried to get the wheel down with the crank, and it wouldn't work. Then we had a bottle of 1,200 pounds pressure. It wouldn't come down. So they told me to stand by. Finally, they said, you'll have to go to a crash drone. They're 3 miles long of tarmac, and then a mile of grass at the end, and they've got 3 flare paths. If you're not in dire emergency, you got a green. If you go out to say 1 wheel, they put me in the middle with the amber, and then if you're in dire emergency, you got red. So I'm in the middle. And I thought, well, I'm not, I'm gonna, but I'm in the North Sea, I'm turning in from the North Sea. 1 engine had quit. So I thought, well, I better come in fairly high, and I came in high, and I came in fairly fast. I never landed on 1 wheel before. Anyway, as soon as the aircraft touched down, I guess there was too much weight, and the oleo leg snapped off, and then I ground looped about 4 times, and I went right across all the flare paths, and I ended up on the grass. And they were so organized there, the crash trucks and the fire engines, they were following that aircraft when it was ground looping. As soon as it stopped, they were on top of there. They chopped open the cockpit, chopped off my harness, pulled me out of there within about 10 seconds. When the commanding officer called me in, and he said, well, Crash, he said, you've survived 4 of them. He said, I got a feeling you're not going to survive the next one. He said, so I'm going to screen you. You've got 19 trips, but you're going to give your ops wing. And he said, if you want to stay here, he said, you can stay here because now most of Europe are occupied. This would be in late December of '44. Early January, he said, we're flying a lot of supplies over to the continent. So if you want to stay here, he said, you can do that. Or he said, you can go back to Canada. So I gave it some thought, and I spoke to Kenny, and he said, oh, well, he said, I'd like to start farming again. Maybe we better go back to Canada. So in January, we went back to Canada. War changes thousands and thousands of lives. One of my close buddies in the Air Force, there's pictures there, his name was Buddy Holloway. And I met Buddy when we did that pre-enlistment course, and he was from Ottawa, and he was engaged to Jean Woods. And he was real tall, good-looking guy, and called me Harry. And it just seemed that whenever we went, we got posted together. And when I went on harvest leave, he went to Regina IT National Training School on Tiger Moss. And of course, I couldn't go. I had to go to the farm for 6 weeks. So then I went to Verdun. I did mine, and then I got posted to Yorkton. And when I got to Yorkton, here, Buddy's there, and that was a bad winter, 42, 43, lots of storms. And they were just going to start their course, so I started the same course as Buddy. We got our wings together, we got our commissions, went overseas together, and every time he would write to Jean, he'd say, "Okay, Harry, put a footnote on this letter to Jean." And I'd always say, "Well, I don't know, Jean." And he'd always say, "You never know. Someday you might meet her." Well, poor old Buddy. We were at Bournemouth. We went to that beam approach training course together. I have a picture of the last day we were there. We had a little bat woman, a Welsh gal. We were sitting there. Somebody took our picture. Went back to Bournemouth. I got posted to Ossington, and he went to a different OTU. And then I found out later when he was doing his last cross country at conversion, they were coming into land, and they had to cross the Great Northern Railway. He was at Skipton, and the engineer absentmindedly switched the engines over to another full tank. Of course, the aircraft lost altitude, and he crashed into the Great Northern Railway, and there were only 3 of them survived, and he was killed. So I remember writing to Jean and said, "Well, if I survive this war, I'll promise you." So to make a long story short, when I got to Ottawa in early January, it was a Saturday, we landed at Lachine, and I phoned and already wired my folks at Melville and told them when I'd be there. I wasn't going to stop. So I phoned, and Jean wasn't there. Her sister, Ange, was there, and she said, "Oh, when will you be arriving in Ottawa?" And I said, "Well, I don't think I'm going to have time." Angie said, "Oh, Jean's going to be so disappointed. She wanted to talk to you about Buddy." I said, "Well, I'm sorry," I said, "but I will already wire my folks." I hung up the phone, and then some little voice said to me, "You know, that's pretty selfish of you. You survived 4 plane crashes. You're still here. Poor old Buddy, he gets killed in his first crash. So the least you can do is go and see her." So I phoned back, maybe 3 hours later, and Jean was home. And she said, "Oh, Anne said you weren't going to be able to stop." And I said, "Well, Jean, I've changed my mind. I am going to stop." She said, "When will you be here?" I said, "Well, I don't really know." I said, "There's hundreds of airmen here. They'll have to fill up a troop train." So eventually, after about 3 days, they got the train full. We landed at the Union Station. It's a beautiful station, big marble pillars. I had my kit bag and I brought my flying boots back with him. So my uncle gave me a little leather bag for putting my flying boots in, and I remember sitting on my kit bag because I didn't know anybody there, and everybody's greeting everybody. And finally, the crowd thinned out, and I looked across, and I saw 2 women standing there looking at a picture. Oh, maybe they're looking for me. So I remember getting my kit bag, and it was cold. I had my gray coat on and my uniform, and I dragged it over there, and I stopped, and I said, "Are you ladies looking for someone?" They said, "Yeah, we're looking for a Flight Lieutenant Harrison." "Oh," I said, "I'm a flight lieutenant. Maybe you're looking for me." Well, that's how I met Jean, and I was going to stay 2 days, and I stayed a week. And I only saw her I went back to the farm. I went down there for 10 days. I went back, and I started working for the Veterans Land Administration in November. In 46, I only got a week's leave. I went down there for a week, and in December 23rd, 46, we were married. Raised 3 daughters. So I often wondered if poor old Buddy had a premonition that he wasn't going to make it. Every time he would say the same thing. You never know. Someday you might meet her. My girls often said, Dad, I'm sure glad you put those footnotes on there. We wouldn't be here.
Probably one of the most envied countries in the world right now is Canada, as far as our ability to maintain a standard of living and a standard of freedom that is envied throughout the world. And when you tell the young people that these things don't come cheaply, they don't hand them to you on a platter. You have to be prepared to defend that what you have. If someone says they're going to try and take it away from you, you have to stand up and defend that particular rights that's inherent in your upbringing. I don't think since the end of the war I've probably missed more than 2 Remembrance Day services. The same with the reunion of the regiment and the serving people in the battalion and the ex-service people of the battalion. You still get a great deal of camaraderie and a sense of wanting to be there. It's not necessarily that someone tells you have to go to these things. It's that you want to be there.
The Maple Leaf unit is all women who have all got a military background in one way or the other. The girls are a fully registered unit, own unit, part of the Anavet organization, and we are the only all-female unit left in Canada. We ring the bells for the Salvation Army, we sell poppies for the Poppy Fund. That's a very heartful thing that we do, selling those poppies, and especially wearing your uniform. People come up and they're fascinated with the uniform and the medals. What are they all about? So you have to make the kids understand that they are mine, and when I'm gone, my family can't wear them. I can't say that I was particularly patriotic before I went in the military, but every chance I get, I promote the military. And I'm very involved in the cadet program, which either it's the small ones, the 10 to 12 Navy League, or the 12 to 19 Sea Cadets for me, teaching these young ones to think on their feet and be good to their neighbors.
For just about 40 years, I've been on the color party with the Legion, and up to 3 years ago, I marched with them on November the 11th. I took the salute for the march past. Well, I think it's important to keep the people involved in it and to show the younger people that we're still remembering those who did lose their lives and fought.
It's nice you can get up, you go to school, and nobody stops you, boys or girls. You have your own religion, and lots of times we just take it for granted. And why do we always just celebrate one day a year, like November the 11th? I don't know. I have people come up, and I appreciate it too. They say thank you for what you've done. I went to the cenotaph of my family every year. That's one of the things we always did, even to this day. My family all come and they support me in this way. And I do feel guilty because I came back, but I'm getting better at it. And oddly enough, when I wear these medals now, yes, I am proud, and I thank my grandson for this. It's just show and tell at school. And this goes back a number of years ago. And my grandson came up, he said, Grandpa, he says, we want you to come over to the school and talk to the kids. And not about, the gory stuff about but he says about just being in the service. But he said, I want you to wear your medals. And I kind of looked at it. Now, my medals were still in the box, those boxes. So he went in my bedroom, got them out, cleaned them all up, put them on. So every year I would put them on. He says, I'm proud of you, Grandpa. He says, you should be proud of yourself, you know. So that kind of hit me the wrong way, you know. But yes, comes November 11th, yeah, I still feel that little guilt. I was up at the Armistice Day, up at the Brent Center there, yes, there's always a kind of a tear in my eye. But, you know, I talk to other veterans, and they have the same, a lot of them have the same feeling, that there's some guilt, that we were here. But, you know, if it wasn't for us coming back to tell them the story, something like that, who would? Who would? You know? I don't like to talk about the gory things. This is up in Germany at the Belsen camps. That we were going along there, and of course they were just liberated, and so I don't know how we ended up there, but we did in front of one of these big camps, and all we just seen it from the front. We seen the stacks of bodies and stuff like that, and remember this here British officer coming over to us where we stopped. Got us all together, and they said, there's a reason why you entered this war. This is one good reason right here. And you hear stories about, you know, different things, that these things never happened. Well, they did happen. They did happen. They did happen to our Air Force guys when they were forced marched. They were forced when they did try to break out the camps and everything else, and they were shot at. These things did happen. There's always a reason. Not because you want to be a hero or patriotic and like that, but there was a job to be done.
If it had went on any longer, we would have lost the war. In my Churchill books over there, Churchill even said that the Germans had come out with a super submarine, twice as big as the other ones, could go faster underwater than our corvettes. Our Navy would be useless. And they had some super weapons. Now, had we lost that war, you and I, we wouldn't be sitting here today. We would have been slaves. They would just walk in and take over Canada, and that would be hell to pay then. But I just wish people would sort of appreciate, they don't have to go all out, just show a little respect on November the 11th and stuff like that. And they don't have to go over. Just understand what people did, what the ex-servicemen did. Yeah, I'm very proud of Saskatoon. They really go all out. The biggest indoor gathering in Canada. The biggest one is, of course, is outdoor one in Ottawa, and nobody shows up like the people of Saskatoon. This would be my hometown. I was born and raised here, and I'm very proud of this city.
All the top pilots that graduated usually ended up as instructors. A lot of people don't realize there are almost 5,000 killed in the British Commonwealth Air Training Plant. They're forgotten heroes, really, because they're the ones that trained us to go overseas. They spent hours and hours. And some people glorify war, embellish things that happen, but there's really no glory in war. It's a terrible thing, but I think there are times when it's necessary to go to war. The emphasis is always on, usually on the military, their losses, but the civilians, they suffer equally. If you think of the Second World War, people don't realize there are almost 60 million people, as close as they can estimate, that lost their lives. And they were mostly civilians.
I guess I took a different view about a lot of things. Came home, and I guess I just realized how lucky I was to be alive, and how lucky I was to come back to a place like this after seeing rubble. Military are respected, and people remember. That's very, very important. when I was still serving, maybe. It wasn't, it didn't seem important to a lot of people, but that's not the case now. I think maybe because people realize what could happen. And maybe remembrance is partly thinking about the future as well as remembrance.